all you happy people. Hope you've been doing good lately. It's been a long time since I reviewed an animated film or released a new video, and I'm sorry about that. I've been pretty busy lately with real world stuff, as well as starting to research on my next big video essay. What will it be on? Well, you'll have to wait and see. But hey, with the summer starting, I figured we ought to start up reviewing animated films again, and considering there's a bunch of promising films on the way, I think we're off to a good start. But first, I guess I should say that one thing I've been doing during that downtime, as in between watching some animated films I haven't seen before, I've also been broadening my film palette and watching a handful of classics while getting a couple of new movies to add to my collection. And speaking of classics, that leads us into talking about our next film, which is part of a franchise that started all the way back in 1987. That movie was called Predator, directed by John McTiernan and starring Arnold Schwarzenegger as Dutch Schaefer, who leads a rescue mission in the jungles of Central America to find a crashed helicopter, only for his team to be targeted by an alien hunter who is starting to pick them off one by one, as it soon becomes a cat and mouse game where they have to survive. As far as 80s action films go, this one is pretty fun and I like it a lot. It's certainly not a perfect film, and I'm not sure I would personally call it one of the best action films of the 80s, but it's certainly one of Arnold's most memorable movies, as it does have some great action, plenty of great characters, memorable lines, and a killer alien designed by the legendary Stan Winston. It's a film that's hard not to have fun with. I really like it, and I'd give it a recommendation if you haven't seen it. That being said, this is a film that did have a hard time getting a good sequel, as Predator 2 was a huge letdown, Predators was just simply okay, and the less said about the Predator, the better. But then in 2022, we finally did get a really good new Predator film that was aptly titled Prey. It was directed by Dan Trachtenberg, the director behind the excellent paranoia thriller 10 Cloverfield Lane, that took the Predator series all the way back to 1719, as we see a Comanche tribe battling the vicious alien. And it was really good. It was the first time the Predator series finally nailed an expansion film, especially as it opened the idea of having a Predator film where the alien goes to earlier points in time and having people from that period dealing with it. Plus, Trachtenberg killed behind the camera. The film ended up being a massive hit on Hulu, and 20th Century Studios certainly felt confident in letting Trachtenberg make more Predator films in this vein, and now we have two films from him coming out this year. One is Predator Badlands, which is due out in November, and the other one is the subject of today's review, Predator, Killer of Killers. An animated anthology film that Trachtenberg directed simultaneously and in secret that also featured the Predator at 3 separate points in time and battling people of that period. And I was really looking forward to this one. When it comes to animated expansions to franchises built in live action, this one really seemed like it was adding more to the narrative and seemed like the creators wanted to add on to the lore of the world, and it didn't certainly look like a pointless cash grab made by the studios to milk money out of a franchise, which was the case for the dreadful Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim. No, this thing really seemed interesting, especially since Trachtenberg was directing it, and the fact that the animation looked really great. This seemed like it could be a pretty great new animated film to kick off the summer. And I can confirm this absolutely was one. I really had a fun time watching this. Predator Killer of Killers not only works as a worthy addition to the Predator series and brilliantly expanding the idea that Prey started, it's also an amazingly crafted animated action film that is pretty brutal, intense, suspenseful, and just a ton of fun. This is a film that I really loved a whole lot, and it is easily one of the best animated films to have come out this year so far. If you liked Prey, you're gonna love Killer of Killers. Okay, as I said before, this film is an anthology film, and the best way to talk about the story of an anthology film is to talk about the segments individually. So let's start off with them in order. The first segment is titled The Shield, which is set in the days of the Vikings in 841 AD, when a warrior named Ursa, played by Lindsay Levanchi, is hunting a tribe led by a man named Zornin, determined to avenge her father whom was murdered by him. However, as soon as they get to the tribe, a predator soon shows up, and she and her tribe, as well as her son Anders, played by Damien Haas, have to figure out how to defeat it. The second segment, The Sword, is set in Japan in 1609 and follows two brothers named Kenji and Kiyoshi, played by Louis Ozawa Changcheng, whom are tasked to fight to take their father's place. After Kenji refuses to fight his brother, Kiyoshi ends up scarring him after initiating a fight, causing the former to leave. 20 years later, Kenji returns to the fortress to confront his brother, only for a predator to ambush them, resulting in the duo fighting the alien. And the third segment is titled The Bullet, which is set during the Second World War in 1942 and follows a fighter pilot named Torres, played by Rick Gonzalez. When an ambush happens in the middle of the Atlantic, Torres then discovers a mysterious weapon in a damaged airplane and realizes it isn't from our world and is exceptionally deadly. And so he flies into the skies to save his troop, led by the pilot Vandy, played by Michael Biehn, and defeat the mysterious airship flown by, well, you know. Eventually, these three stories will intersect in the climax, but I'm not going to get into that since you're going to have to see it on your own. Now, I'm going to be talking about this film a bit differently than I usually do, since this is an animated anthology story, and I can't really go in the order of story, animation, and characters like I usually do, so much like how I broke down the plots of the film, we're going to be talking about the stories individually and what works about them and what doesn't. But first, I should start off by talking about the two things that do work in all three. One is the direction, which is top-notch. Dan Trachtenberg really excelled working with animation, much like how he does in live action, as he really commands this film with a ton of energy and suspense. I can tell he was really able to go all out with what he could show with this film, as he was able to make some of the kills a lot more graphic than I expected, while showing set pieces that would be really difficult to do if they were in live action. This is a top-notch directed film, and he continues to shine as one of Hollywood's most underrated directors with so much potential to show. The other element that works in this film is the animation, which is simply gorgeous. This is another film that has used hyper-stylized animation, and it is breathtaking. The film is animated by the VFX studio The Third Floor, and they have done a stellar job with this. The film is a cross between a painting and a comic book with its visuals, and it has a dynamic color palette with each of the three segments, and really has some striking shots, especially during the action sequences. Plus, the look of the blood of both the humans and predators really is impactful with the bright reds and greens. It stands out big time, and it really helps make this film justify its R rating. And now, let's talk about the stories themselves. How are they overall? I did really like all of them, but there was one in particular that mainly stood out. And that was the second segment, The Sword. This one was easily the best, as the storytelling in the segment was airtight, and the bonds between the characters felt the strongest. The story is told almost entirely through visual storytelling, and you really feel the tension and pain that arises between the two brothers as they fight to affirm who will succeed their father before putting their differences aside and fighting the predator. It's truly a sad story, and it's easily the one that stood out the most because it felt the most passionate and developed out of all of them. Also, any story that's set in Japan and it has to deal with samurai is gonna have my attention immediately. The first segment, The Shield's biggest benefit, is mainly the action, because this is where it got to shine the most in the entire film. There are some great set pieces in this one, which includes a great one-shot take when Ursa and her tribe arrive at the enemy's fortress, as well as a suspenseful moment when she's underneath the ice of a frozen lake trying to hold her breath while the predator is on top of the ice trying to find her. It's really great stuff, and the one segment where the action had me on the edge of my seat the most. Though its biggest drawback is sadly the characters, who feel underdeveloped. Apart from Ursa, whom we see her tragic backstory, we're never fully attached to the tribe as much as we should be, as the other characters did feel disposable, and some of the sad moments didn't feel as fully earned as they should be, especially between the bond with Ursa and Anders. That should have been a lot more fleshed out than it was, and it really didn't make the whole thing stick the landing. But when the action is as good as it is, it's easy to forgive it. The third segment, The Bullet, is easily the most unique of the three in terms of story, as we see the US Air Force fight the predators in the air, and I do like the build-up when Torres realizes the danger of the creatures before the action starts to start, and I think this is one that has a really good arc for the character, as he has to learn to start to think independently and on his feet without the help of others, especially as the Predator starts to take out his comrades one by one. And there is also some intense set pieces in this segment as well, which includes a moment where he has to go onto the wing while the plane is flying to try to drop a bomb. It's pretty thrilling. However, I do think the dialogue in this one should have been tightened a lot more. There were some pretty cliche lines in this that did make me roll my eyes when I was watching it, including one right before Torres gets airborne where a soldier goes, "All of our fighters are in the air," and Torres responds, "Not all of them." Oh god, that was lame. I saw that dialogue coming a mile away. But the segment still really works, and it does stick the landing in the end. And all the segments come to a head in a brilliant climax that gives meaning to the title. So, yeah, as far as animated additions to live-action franchises go, Predator Killer of Killers more than justifies its existence and is a truly great animated film. This was fantastic. While some of the segments do have a bit of weaknesses, the film thrives thanks to its very strong stories that expand the lore of Predator well, excellent animation with some fantastic action sequences that are all fantastically directed, and some good characters that are all well fleshed out and strong. This is a really damn great animated film, and it's one I do highly recommend checking out. If you have a Hulu account, give it a watch, and if you don't, I'd say it's worth a subscription. And with that, I'm giving Predator Killer of Killers a 9. This does justice to Predator and really does expand the ideas of prey so well. We're off to a good start as far as animated films that are coming out this summer, if this is any indication, and I can say that I hope this does give more ideas on how to expand live-action franchises with animation. Because as far as how this stacks as a Predator film, and as one of the animated films of 2025 that have been released so far, this film kills.